Welcome back, everyone. France has described as groundless the allegation by Niger Republic that Nigeria offered its territory to France as a base to destabilize the former French colony. The political counselors to the Embassy of France in Nigeria, Mr. Bertrand Destabilisation, refuted the claim made by the leader of Niger military junta, General Abdurrahman Tiani. And let's remind you that Tiani recently alleged that Nigeria was colluding with France to undermine Niger. He accused France of plotting to destabilize Niger by using neighboring Benin Republic and Nigeria as bases for attacks. Meanwhile, the Nigerian government, through the Office of the National Security Advisor, Nuhu Ribadu, has refuted the claims that Nigeria is involved in any military cooperation with France. And according to him, the country's relationship with the European Union is strictly economic. With this as a background tonight, let's have a robust conversation with Professor Mohammed Tukor, who is the National Publicity Secretary, Arewa Consultative Forum. He joins us virtually from Kebbi State. Good evening to you, Prof. Thank you very much and welcome to Politics Tonight.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here and thank you for inviting me.
Thank you very much. This conversation has been on for some days now since General Tiani made that statement where he accused Nigeria of allowing France to use its territory as a staging ground for destabilizing Niger. The question some have asked is what exactly would Nigeria gain in causing instability in a country like Niger? Prof.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here and thank you for inviting me.
Thank you very much. This conversation has been on for some days now. Prof, did you get that question? Welcome back to Politics Tonight, everyone. Let's bring you more stories. Chief of Air Staff, Air Marshal Hassan Abubakar says Nigeria has taken delivery of 14 advanced aircraft out of 64 expected within 3 years. He described the current dispensation in the Nigerian Air Force as a golden era. The Air Chief also commended the Ministry of Defense support to strengthening its operational readiness. The Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Defense was on a familiarization visit to the Air Force headquarters, where he emphasized the significance of civil-military cooperation, its significance in the fight against insecurity.
We will pay a lot of attention to activities that will make us work more collaboratively. Already we are looking at the review of the National Defense Policy. We will try to accelerate that because ideally we should have a review every 5 years. I think the last one was in 2017 or so. A committee has already been set up. We will try very hard to get this committee running and try to work with timelines to see how much we can achieve very quickly. Over the past year, we have taken delivery of 14 brand new advanced aircraft as part of the 64, which will be delivered in a space of 3 years. It is therefore no exaggeration to state that the Nigerian Air Force is experiencing a golden era under the current administration.
Let's now speak with Professor Mohammed Tukor, who is the National Publicity Secretary, Arewa Consultative Forum, as France rejects the stabilization claim by Niger. Prof, good evening to you. Thank you very much for joining us on Politics Tonight.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm happy to be with you tonight.
Thank you. You know, this conversation has been on for some days now since General Tiani made that statement where he accused Nigeria of allowing France to use its territory as a staging ground for destabilizing Niger. My first question to you is, you know, some have asked what exactly would Nigeria gain in causing instability in a country like Niger? Prof.
Thank you.
Well, you are right. The accusations by the Nigerian president were, of course, unprecedented. And, of course, the right question that any right-thinking person will ask is what Nigeria will gain from being used as a base to attack Niger. On the face of it, is counterintuitive. It just doesn't make sense. Of course, you could say that the only thing Nigeria would gain would be negative, would be chaos in our own house. Now, look, everything that the president said has a history and it has a context, and it's important that we understand this in order to see where the president of the Republic of Niger is coming from. As you know, in the last 1.5 to 2 years, there's been this ping pong between Nigeria and Niger. and of course the other West African countries. The problem with military takeovers, or you can say the problem with unconstitutional takeover of government, is that no matter what the intentions are, within a short time you run out of trouble. Within a short time you overcome, you overreach your welcome. And of course you have to prove that you are different from those you have overthrown. Now of course it's human nature. When you are confronted with problems like that, you either start to see shadows, you begin to imagine enemies, real or potential, and so on. And I think the key point here has to do with the initial reaction of the member state of the ECOWAS after the Nigerian coup. One would have thought cooler heads should have prevailed. And of course the threat to invade Niger, of course, is unprecedented. It has never happened in the history of the ECOWAS. And I will say, except for a few places like Uganda and others where this took place. And I think Niger is suffering from a hangover of anger. And of course, you can say right anger over that. We have a history. The colonial power, France, of course, had a history of refusing to let African countries that it once controlled have some, what we say in Nigeria, a breath of air. Now, of course, the anger would boil, and of course, this kind of thing is once you run out of ideas, you begin to manufacture them. To go back to your question, Nigeria will have very, very little to gain from being allowed or spearheading an attack on Niger itself. You have to remember that the difference between us and the Nigerian Republic, to the east, Cameroon, to the west, Togo, Benin, and so on, they are artificial. Someone came overnight and drew a line inside your house and said, those to the left belong to one house, those to the right belong to a different one. It's going to be very difficult to overcome.
But isn't it worrisome to hear him say
boundaries that were not there before?
Right,
so that we continue to have these problems. And I'm also of the view that whatever one says, attacking Niger or allowing some other country to attack Niger will be a big miscalculation for Nigeria. And I'm sure the Nigeria I know, what we have, we will not go into that kind of misadventure. We have enough problems with our own. Of course, you could say, that what really happened is, let's say I'm a herder and I had goats and sheep. And then the next day I woke up and I saw someone who is playing with hyenas, my neighbor buying hyenas to tie them. Of course, I will get jittery, and I think that is exactly what happened.
But Prof, Chani went on to say Nigerian authorities are not... Can you hold on, Prof?
Niger, yes, it's natural that Chani will get jittery. And of course, when you don't deal with things in a calm and non-emotional manner, you say a lot of things. But of course, I give it to him that he probably has had access to intelligence that you and I do not have. But then I insist, it just doesn't make sense that Nigeria would do that. It doesn't make sense. Nigerians who have a history, going back over 60 years of rejecting military bases on the soils of the country, will now go ahead to be allowed to be used by another country to attack our neighbors. I on this score, I'm with the administration that it just doesn't make sense. And if it does, it will be one heck of a senseless adventure that I don't think anybody in their right mind will back that. But of course, France has a history of interfering. France has been the most stubborn colonial power. So you see, there is context, and there is also the problem of trust. Any move by France will be seen as negative, because for the last 250 years, France has been playing nothing but exploitation with African countries. And it's going to be very, very difficult for France to establish itself, because it has refused, or it is very reluctant to let go of its colonial or neo-colonial hold on African countries. It has not been able to wean itself away from that drain pipe that takes resources away from Africa to develop France to the detriment of the African countries. But for us in Nigeria, I want to believe that no, Nigeria would never have that kind of adventurous and miscalculated attempt to allow France or any country for that matter to use Nigeria as a base. Not even Benin Republic will be allowed, I hope, to be used to attack Niger, let alone some foreign European country whose
all right, Prof, let me comment. You've said a lot, and I guess it's important for us to visit these issues one after another, because Janet went on to say Nigerian authorities are not unaware of this. He calls it underhanded move. And according to him, it is near a forest close to Sokoto where they wanted to establish a terrorist stronghold. Prof, you're very conversant with Sokoto State. Is there any likelihood that such atrocities will be going on in Sokoto State? Also, would you say the onus is on Chani to come forward with evidence of his claims? Are there any consequences for adventure he cannot defend these unguarded claims?
Yeah, there's a lot of noise in the background. I can't hear you very well, but I think I sense what you are asking. Look, you see, our relationship with Niger has not changed for over 250 years. What I mean is that despite the colonial boundaries, Nigerian communities interact with the people of Niger Republic normally, as if nothing has happened. Come to the northwest here, in Kebbi State, for example. There is a city called Dole Kaina. The colonial boundary between Nigeria and Niger cut right across the settlement, so that the separation is just a street of not more than 6 meters wide. You cannot stop that kind of relationship. You cannot put that boundary and think that it will subside. It will not. Day and night, Nigerians go into Niger. Day and night, Nigerian people come into Nigeria for legitimate businesses. And I don't think even if you are to bring the Chinese army to protect the borders, we will be able to stop the influx of goods and service across the boundaries. So that's why I said it is doubly counterintuitive to think we will take a knife and, stab ourselves in the chest. I think it will not happen. But I agree that citizens must be vigilant, not to allow any such movement, not to allow any such misadventure, not to forget the history of France and their political interference and military interference in African countries. But also, of course, a lot of movement is going on. French military forces have been thrown out of many African countries, and we hope this will continue. Senegal, Chad, Mali, Burkina Faso, and others, and I think it will continue to follow. You remember in the 80s, only the Republic of Guinea was able to stand up to France and say they wanted their independence. They paid dearly for it. Of course, France removed every needle they took into Guinea as a punishment. But you see, the problem is you come in and you occupy my house, and I say, pack and go, and you are getting angry, as if you were there by invitation anyway. Ivory Coast is following this, and is following suit. I hope the French government and citizens of France will now see the light that there is a limit to how long you can hold a people and refuse to let them go and expect them to be happy and expect them to be smiling about it. You are not here on invitation. You came here following your imperial interests and so on. Now, I'm very happy that my country, Nigeria, will not be dragged into that kind of manipulation.
I hear you, Prof. But could this be unconnected to the recent relationship or the resurrected relationship between Nigeria and France? Because Nur Ribadi, for instance, says the country's relationship with a European nation is strictly economic. What do you think Chani is afraid of? And second, is Nigeria's relationship with France a threat to the North?
You see, Nigeria has a right to enter into diplomatic relationship with any country of their choice, no matter what someone thinks. But I think what the thing to be on the lookout is a question earlier. Niger, we should ask itself, what has Nigeria got to gain from such a from such a rapprochement between Nigeria and Niger. France will eventually leave, but Nigeria has nowhere to go. Niger has nowhere to go. We are one continuous physical and social and political community. So that what I would have loved to see, rather than the open public brickbats, there should be backdoor diplomatic channels. If the government of the Republic of Niger thinks it has evidence, this should be taken up with the Nigerian government behind the doors. There is nothing that cannot be resolved. And so on between neighbors. We are actually in the same house. It's just that there is an artificial dividing line, and I think there are better, I personally think there are better ways of handling the dispute, even if the Nigerian regime feels a bit jittery. But of course, like I said, and I keep emphasizing, there is a context, and it has to go back to 250 years, or more than that. It has to do with the colonial imposition of boundaries in Africa. But I think if I would prefer to see a situation where the Nigerian government refuses to be provoked into a public debate with the government or the president of the Republic of Niger. Sometimes if you are the big boy, you have to stoop to conquer. You treat provocations with a gentle hand. That gives you a moral advantage over the anger or the emotional outburst of your neighbors or those who think are your genius, they shouldn't be talking to you. Tolerance, diplomacy, and especially understanding and cooperation, I think, will solve the problem. Eventually, I hope and I pray that the people and the government of the Republic of Niger will see that there is nothing to gain, and this is far-fetched, and it will not happen.
Prof, I like that you've gone there, because there are insinuations that France may be going through the back door, and Nigeria may be unaware of this. Some have talked about how France may be seeking a strategic ally in the region. Nigeria is the largest economy and most populous nation in Africa, presents an alluring option. For France, aligning with President Tinubu could mean regaining a foothold in West Africa, a critical region for its global ambition. What does this alliance mean for Nigeria, Prof?
Well, it means a lot of things. Let's face it. France, no matter what we think, as much as I don't like their policies, as much as I never admire their colonial policy, has also a right to seek strategic interests elsewhere, to enter into alliances where it thinks it can gain. But you see, those with whom they are trying to establish a relationship are also not fools. We are no longer the small children that can be told, look at the mirror. As you are looking at the mirror, they carry your people into slavery. So this is something that the Nigerian government would need to take into consideration. I would prefer that the Nigerian authorities will focus on improving the lives of the majority of their citizens. The citizens have been living in one of the most horrible conditions in the world. The number of women and children suffering, the standards of living are low. If I were the government, well, I'm not, but I would concentrate on improving the lives of my people. And in the long run, this is what will confer legitimacy to the regime in Niger or elsewhere. If you see what is happening in Burkina Faso, rather after all the noise, the government is setting itself a task of improving the lives of the people, tackling insecurity, and the insecurity problem, the threats between that Niger and Nigeria faces are similar. It is everyone. I'm sure the military authorities in Abuja know very well that you cannot win this war against insecurity and terrorism without cooperation with Niger. And it's unfortunate that Niger left the multinational task force in the Chad. But I am personally confident that in the end, they will see to it that there is no gain in hyping this so-called tension between the countries, that what we need are cooler heads. And France has a right to come to Africa, but it is up to Africans to look at the coming of France with wide eyes, with ears open, so that we are not taken by surprise. I think we have gone beyond one country blatantly using another as a base to sabotage another. It just won't happen. Even if it happens, it will going to be a very, very short-lived, and it will not work. In the long run, the country that seeks to divide those two brothers and sisters will be the country that will be put to shame.
And apart from the economic implications, perhaps we should go back memory lane, because some have brought back the memories of France's meddling during the Nigerian civil war, which they say should serve as a stark reminder of the risk involved in causing up to a nation with a track record of exploiting Africa for its gain. Do you agree that any alliance with France must be scrutinized through the lens of national interest and historical experience?
It's not just France, it's any country whatsoever. Yeah, we know about the French role in the Civil War, but what was the result? All those that attempted, including fellow African countries far away in East Africa, Tanzania, for example, was one of those. But what was the result? They were put to shame. The Nigerian Civil War ended. General Gawan came with his policy of no victor, no vanquish, rehabilitation, reconciliation, and all that, and everything. More or less, we have problems. We will continue to have problems, but we have overcome that by and large. In fact, the more we quarrel, the more we are reintegrated into each other. I mean, if you look at it, breaking up Nigeria will be one of the worst nightmares in international relations. Where are the boundaries going to be? Who is going to be where? And so on. What we need is actually the entrenchment of the principles of good governance, anti-corruption. Once we get those things right, all these agitations and so on will eventually fizzle out. It will never be fizzle out completely. In the early 90s, Texas had the misadventure of saying they want to break away from the United States. It did not happen. Look at what is happening between Scotland and England and other places. Sri Lanka went through very devastating civil war, very costly. Sri Lanka is now one country. Just a few years ago, 1 or 2 years ago, they were fighting for good governance, not separation and so on. They were fighting anti-corruption and so on. And I think eventually this is what people will realize. All these primordial sentiments of going it alone and so on in a globalized world is going to lead to more isolation and more problems.
To be clear, what you're saying tonight is that the Tinubu administration must tread carefully because Nigeria cannot afford to become a stepping stone for France's resurgence in West Africa. Is this also a case of not just where this alliance is heading, but whether it is worth the price Nigeria may have to pay?
Like I said, if I can repeat, Nigeria is not a fool. The Nigerian government knows clearly what is at stake.
Welcome back to Politics Tonight, everyone. Thank you very much for staying with us on the program. National Publicity Secretary, Arewa Consultative Forum, Professor T.A. Mohamed Baba is my guest tonight as France rejects the stabilization claim by Niger. Prof, thank you very much for staying with us on the program. Now let's wrap up this way because a decision has now been made on whether Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger would be accommodated back into the region. It's the first time in the bloc's nearly 50 years of existence that its members are withdrawing in such a manner. Analysts say it's an unprecedented blow to the group. Talk to us about the threats this poses to the region's stability. Have we begun to experience it with Jordan Chani's latest move? All right, that's our package on the program tonight. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. I'll see you again on Monday. Good night.